Are you still with me? No. The Promise is a book that is about the promise. It's about a promise. It's about 4 funerals, as I said. 4 funerals in a family called the Zwart family. Zwart is a Dutch word or Afrikaans word. It means schwarz in German and black in English. So there's a white family with a name Black, with a last name Black. They're living on a huge property. There's a father, a mother, and 3 children. And the 3 children are called Anton, Astrid, and Amor. And in the first part of the book, the first chapter is about 80 pages long or something. The mother dies very young. She's 40 years old. She has cancer. She's terminal cancer. She's going to die. This, of course, is a very huge loss for this family, for this Schwartz family. It's so dark here. And mother dies, but Amor, the youngest daughter of the family, she has overheard her mother saying on her deathbed that she wanted, it was her last will, to give the house to Salome. Salome is the maid of the house, the black maid of the house who worked for decades in that house. And she has sort of given her life and her time and her weekends to the family. She has raised the children more or less. And the mother wants to give that house to Salome. But the father, Amor, talks to her father on the funeral, days of the funeral, when the funeral is being prepared. And the father says, no, I don't think that she said that. You must have heard something that's not true. Well, so the house is not going to give. The house is not being given to Salome, which wouldn't have been possible because the first part of the book is in 1984. Apartheid is still lingering, still ruling the country, and it was not allowed for black people to own houses in the country. They weren't allowed to vote either. They weren't allowed to do nothing actually. The second part of the book is another funeral, and I'm not going to tell you who dies in this book because it would be kind of spoiler, but the second one is okay. I will give you the second one. About 10 years later, that's the time when Mandela takes over in the African National Congress, when apartheid is abolished. About 10 years later, the father of the family dies, and there's another funeral. And Amor has left Pretoria. I think this place is out close to Pretoria, city of Pretoria. Amor has left. She's somewhere. She needs to be found to give her the news that her dad has died. And Anton and Astrid's lives, the other siblings, have changed a lot. And Astrid is a pretty conservative person who is also maintaining, I think, in a way, the racial segregation. Anton is the oldest son. He wants to be the writer. But he's not managing anything, actually, more or less in his life. He's a very sad figure. Galgut is very observant, and I actually have to read one of my favorite parts. I have so many parts that I would love to read to you. So let's do the first one. One of the great strengths of this book, of this novel, and one of the strengths of Damon Galgut is how he is able to shift from one person to the other, and how he's able to say so much about a character in a few sentences, and how he drags us over by moving the narrative voice from one perspective to the next within a single sentence or a paragraph. But here's about Amor in the first chapter. If you could only make her out, there's one figure sitting very still close by. Amor. She hasn't moved from her place at the table, though everybody else has left. Hasn't twitched a limb or a brow. In fact, for the past couple of minutes, so sunken is she in thought or something else. She's contemplating her brother, Anton, who's regarding her from the rooftop in return. But her reflections are internal, amazement in a way. That he could speak like that, could say what he did. It must be wonderful to be a man. She has a peculiar longing to take him by the hand, not to lead him anywhere, just to hold on, or maybe to be led. She's used to being treated as a blur, a smudge at the edge of everybody's vision. Too young, too silly to be taken seriously. And strange too, a strange child. Unusual and maybe tragic, easy to overlook. But tonight her brother, from his high place, seemed to notice me. Seemed to notice me. That's also something that happens time after time again. that Galgut describes a scene, and suddenly comes a change to the first person or to the second person, that he's sort of moving this story very closely toward the character by saying, or maybe to be led, seem to notice me. By saying, but tonight her brother from his high place seemed to notice me Amor. But then it can also be that he addresses us, the readers. And I read this together with Nyambura from Nairobi in Kenya, and it was a very beautiful buddy read. We had great discussions, I think, on Discord. And she sort of, I think you have to correct me if I got you wrong here. I think Nyambura said that Galgut is writing this out of the perspective of a white privileged man, nevertheless. And yes, I agree to the fullest that he does so. But I think that he also avoids both making a mistake and stepping on a mine. Because if he would have tried to add Salome's stronger voice of Salome or Lucas to this novel, people would have, rightly so, criticized him for not being able, as a white privileged man from South Africa, to sort of take the perspective of a black person from South Africa. There's one beautiful scene in the end of the book when it really comes to the fact, it's not a spoiler, that Amor wants to give money or the house to Salome and her son when she's talking to the son, to Lucas. And in this short conversation between Lucas and Amor, she says to him, Amor says to Lucas, I want to give you this and that. And Lucas says, what are you trying to give us that wasn't ours from the very beginning? And I think that you see that where Galgut stands, and but he's writing this from a very white perspective. It's the decay of a family, the destruction of a family, 4 funerals, which also reminded me of the movie, actually, 4 weddings and a funeral, because, and Nyambura remarked this, that of course it's a very nice sort of trick for authors or for filmmakers to gather as much characters as possible within a certain period of time, like every 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 years or something, with a big time gap where people's lives have changed and then they meet again and you realize what has happened to them. It's of course also a tool to tell the story, to tell the structure of the story. And that's what he does. And what I love about Galgut's novel, The Promise, and that's why I know it was hyped, and many of you have said it's hyped and you don't like hype novels. I usually don't like hype novels either that much, but this one is hyped for a good reason, because we have such a great writer who has such a beautiful English, such an elegant way of painting the pictures, of painting these portraits of this family, of Astrid, of Anton, of Amor, of her father and her mother, of South Africa in the change, of the promise of giving the country. That was the promise in 1994, right when Nelson Mandela was released, that the promise was for the black African people to give that country back to where it belonged. That's what Lucas says. But the reality in 2021 looks so much different when you see where the wealth is, where the resources are, and who has the actual economic power, who has the actual possibility of inherit huge sums, of inherit something that was stolen from the majority of the people from the very beginning. The promise was a lie from the beginning. And that's what it is to Astrid. That's this lie. The promise is a dream, a lie if it don't come true, sings Bruce Springsteen in a very different context in the beautiful song The River. But here you can say, is a promise a lie if it's broken, if it's never fulfilled? Because the promise was, you can take over your country. It's your country, take over it. Rule it. But then, 27 years later, what has really happened? A lot of things have happened to the better, of course. People are no longer forced to be separated in a visible way. But they are separated still. How come? That's, I think, also something that lingers in the background of The Promise, and that's what makes it such a great novel, and what gives the world, 27 years after apartheid ended, attention to the situation of South Africa by printing. I mean, the winner of the Booker Prize novel, I think Chatto and Witness is the company who published this book. They had 151,000 extra copies had to be printed of this book. 150,000 readers who will sort of look at this and who will realize what happened to The Promise. To the promise of the Swart family, but also to the promise of a whole country. Let me continue with another example of why this is so elegant written. So much irony and elegance and humor that you find in just a few. Sometimes it's the farm that's let her down. When she got married, she imagined painting watercolors in the hills and riding a horse across a vast plain. Vague, glamorous dreams like that. She didn't expect the days to be so long and bare here, with so much nothing going on. You have to keep finding reasons to drive into the city or out to Rustenburg, somewhere with a lot of life and event and color. People to talk to. Used to have her nails and hair done every week, but it caused meltdowns in the marriage. No money for bullshit, he says, but look at him, what he spends it on. Literally pissing it away. At least she's got something to show. Though she has to admit she's been happier lately since discovering meditation classes at the Whole Human Center. Moti changed his name, and there are days when she'd like to change hers too. A different name can make you feel different inside. Sometimes it's South Africa that disappoints her. Who could have foreseen that her daddy, who everybody used to respect and fear, would have to go in front of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and admit to doing these horrible, necessary things? The problem with this country, in her opinion, is that some people just can't let go of the past. That's Desiree, the wife of Anton, reflecting about her marriage and about how life was and what it has become. And the last funeral of the book is happening. Again, people have to look for Amor, for the younger sister, because she has moved away from Pretoria. And then she's finally found, and Galgut describes how she's living right now. And this is so elegant and beautiful that I have to read it. Then follow her that evening as she walks along a few streets to where she lives, and if it weren't for the uniform, you wouldn't notice her, especially in the home-going crowd. Nothing about her that stands out. Nor in her small studio apartment on the third floor of a nondescript block. The front door opens into a modest living room from which a tiny kitchen and bathroom lead off. Her bed is a futon mattress rolled up in the corner, and there's very little other furniture aside from the sparse trappings of a single chair and table and a built-in cupboard. That's it. In fact, to judge by the squares of slightly different color on the wall, she's removed a couple of paintings and put them away out of sight. She can feel her own perspiration sticking her uniform to her skin and gets undressed, forcing herself to remove the garments in a random order against her own inclination. It's okay, Amo, no bad spells will be released. She would like to bathe, but it's not allowed. The dams are nearly empty and water is rationed, so the shower is instead just for 2 minutes, saving the runoff in the tub to use later. Would normally make upper now, but the electricity's off again. Yes, happening here too, happening all over the country. Long dark patches in the power. The grid is collapsing, no maintenance and no money. The president's friends have run off with the cash. No lights, no water, lean times in the land of plenty. Amor isn't put out, she'll eat later when the lights come back on. Meanwhile, she sits in front of the living room window with only a towel wrapped around her, looking out at the mountain in the last light. She has a cat curled up on her lap. No, she doesn't, there is no cat. But allow her a couple of plants at least, growing greenly in their tins on the windowsill. She's given them a little water from what she saved in the bath. So here she's describing the situation where Amor is living, gives a very good description that she's living withdrawn, that she has, and you also get to know about the situation of South Africa because water is rationed, because it has the president's friends have run off with the money and with the resources. That's President Jacob Zuma, who had to resign in 2018. We are that far now in the history of the country. And the beautiful scene where she has a cat curled up on her lap, and then the narrator says, no, she doesn't, there's no cat. It's like if he sort of takes us into his process of writing. He's writing with a cat curled up. No, not a cat. But allow her some plans. So this is a discussion that he's having with himself, but also with us, the readers, and he's breaking the normal conventions of the novel by sort of always getting us into the story. There's another scene, a beautiful scene in this book that I love that I didn't find, where it's about Bob the beggar, who is in a church. He's outside a church, which plays a very important role in the part. And then we learn so much about Bob the beggar, and the story sort of gets carried away to Bob the beggar, and from the main track of the story. And then suddenly Galgut says, but now, let's stop, Bob the beggar, because you're carrying us away, you're dragging us away from our real story. We have to get back to the main line. So bye-bye, Bob. That was your time in this book. And I love that. I love the promise. I think he's telling a great story, a political story as well, about a promise that has been given not only to Salome, but also to the whole population of South Africa, to the majority, to give them sort of the country back, but it hasn't happened, not even in 2022. And it's a very good winner of the Booker Prize of 2021, a book that everybody should read and that most of the people who have read it love. I love it too. Thanks very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you very soon. Bye-bye.